a prominent part in the civil rights movement. Of course, many of you will have noted the way that he encouraged his audience to repeatedly chant, "Yes, we can," in reply to the points that he made during his campaign rallies and in his victory speech. So there, and I'll choose my words very carefully here, can be little, I've already been accused of being patronising and defeatist when I talked about Obama, so I hope you'll treat me a bit more kindly this afternoon. There can be little doubt that Obama is an impressive performer. He's a very fine orator, he's an articulate and thoughtful writer, and I would encourage you to read both of his books, Dreams of My Father and The Audacity of Hope, which he wrote himself. They weren't written by a ghostwriter. And in seeing off first the Clintons and then the Republican Party machine, he has clearly proved himself to be an impressive campaigner. So he's an impressive performer, but is there any real substance to it? Is he the real deal? Will he actually deliver for black people? As I've already suggested, many people are somewhat sceptical about his chances. Indeed, some people have suggested that they've kind of complained that he's not black enough. That, and it's not simply that, because his mother is white and his father was Kenyan, that some people are saying he's not a son of slaves and therefore he doesn't have a genuine affinity with and therefore cannot deliver for his black brethren. But of course the major flaw, you can bet your bottom dollar that if his presidency is a failure he'll be black enough there. The major flaw, however, in those kinds of assessments is that they continue to be based upon the colour of his skin rather than the content of his character. And I don't think that that's a trap that we as socialists should fall into. We shouldn't look at him through that kind of narrow prism. Instead, you have to critically examine his background and politics. Now, I think it's quite interesting. Toni Morrison, who is one of these kind of revered figures in the black community, she's a bit like Stevie Wonder. Stevie hasn't made a decent record for 30 years. You're not allowed to criticise him. He hasn't come on. When you speak, you can name the one that you have. But the important thing about Toni Morrison is that Toni Morrison eventually did endorse Barack Obama, but originally she thought that Hillary Clinton should get the Democratic Party nomination. But the key point that she made was this, and part of the reason was, she argued that Obama was a beneficiary of the struggle, but was never really a part of it. No one had heard of him really before he made a speech at the Democratic Party convention in 2004, and he was a fairly moderate and conventional first-term senator. And that, I think, is a point that comes across clearly in his book, The Audacity of Hope. I think it's slightly unfair. He wasn't from a posh background. His family did have to survive without his father. He clearly did suffer racism, and he clearly has some familiarity with and sympathy and support for both the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement. He has engaged in discussions with unions. He has, as Socialist Review reveals this month, reads and listens to people like Manning Marable, and he says quite consciously in his book, and I'll quote him, "I can't but help view the American experience through the eyes of a black man of mixed heritage, forever mindful of how generations of people who looked like me were subjugated and stigmatized, and the subtle and not so subtle ways that race and class continue to shape our lives." Now, having said that, clearly this is a man who has made more than made his peace with the Democratic Party. So he's also, in the same book, boldly declares, "I believe in the free market, competition and entrepreneurship, and think that no small number of government programmes don't work as advertised." And moreover, you read what he says in the book, and as a constitutional lawyer, it's quite clear that he reveres the American Constitution and buys into the idea of the American dream. In other words, he might speak like a preacher, but he is no fire and brimstone radical. But it's too crude to simply say that this is a guy who's going to enter office in January determined to sell out. To be fair to him, again, he admits that he can't deliver everything. I'm going to quote him again. He says this again in the book. Undoubtedly, some of my views will get me into trouble. I'm new enough on the national political scene that I serve as a blank screen on which people of vastly different political stripes project their own views. As such, I am bound to disappoint some, if not all of them. So he openly admits that he will let down many of his supporters. You know, his predecessor, Clinton, supposedly the first black president in some ways, is a guy who says, you know, that we can campaign in poetry, but we have to govern in prose. I mean, basically, comrade, Obama himself says he's not going to deliver everything. Then we should take him at his word. And, you know, I think clearly the pressure is already on for him to moderate his agenda. Martin, of course, will talk in greater detail about the compromises and so on. The warning that I will end on is this, is that the road down which he has travelled is one that, as a result of the gaps that were opened up by the Black Power movement, has been travelled by literally hundreds of thousands before him. We have had, over the last 15 or 20 years, black police chiefs, district attorneys, mayors, governors, congressmen and women, Supreme Court judges, and of course the last two Secretaries of State, Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice. And despite that, we have a situation where we saw, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, the levels of deprivation that blacks continue to live in. We continue to have a situation where in some ghettos, life expectancy is worse than in Bangladesh, where 1/3 of black men are somehow trapped in the criminal justice system, despite having those people in positions of power and influence. So although we can say, he's not determined to sell out, the likelihood is that he will not deliver, especially in the face of $1 trillion recession and 2 world wars. And I'll finish by saying this. It was simply not the case that all the civil rights movement was interested in doing was putting black faces in high places. That was the first part of their strategy, winning the civil right, the right to vote and getting blacks into positions of influence. But King himself died in Memphis in '68 when he was there supporting a sanitation workers' struggle. He realised that the struggle had moved on. He famously said that there's no point desegregating the lunch counters, one of the key demands of the civil rights movement. What's the point desegregating them if once they get to the counter, blacks don't have $1 to buy a hamburger and a cup of coffee? He realised, therefore, that the struggle had to move on and that it had to move to wage a deeper social and economic struggle. So therefore, we have to go beyond simply winning votes, putting blacks into positions of power. This absolutely is where I'll finish off. I think the most impressive part of Obama's campaign was not his speeches, not him himself, but the fact that hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people rallied to support him actively. And as a result of that grassroots campaign, millions of black people and white working class people and Hispanics voted, probably for the first time ever, in a presidential election. The question is, and it's posed in some ways by Noam Chomsky in Socialist Review, is that constituency of people simply going to be an army who will deliver the vote, who will be called upon to encourage people to support him, or will they be prepared to stay together, to coalesce, and to organise and struggle and to fight independently for the real change that we need, that Obama certainly will not deliver?